they're going to be listening very closely, Chris. And we know that the Trump administration has been hinting for several days now that they could be making an announcement about whether to put North Korea back on the list of state sponsors of terrorism, a list that they were taken off almost 10 years ago during negotiations over North Korea's nuclear program. We know how that turned out. They now have a bigger nuclear arsenal than they ever have and are perfecting their missile capabilities. And North Korean officials reiterated to me just within the last couple of hours that they will, in their words, round off their nuclear program, which means more nuclear tests and more missile launches. But the big question, when? Will they do it to coincide with President Trump's visit here in the region? And, of course, the unknown, how will the president and the administration respond to that? Of course, it depends on what kind of test. North Korea has threatened everything from an above-ground nuclear test to launching missiles in the direction of the U.S. territory of Guam. Both of those have not happened yet, but the North Koreans are certainly doubling down on the final steps, they say, for their nuclear program. And even though President Trump did say that diplomacy is on the table, and the North Koreans haven't ruled out talks either, the U.S. wants denuclearization. The North Koreans say their nukes are here to stay. They say that those nuclear weapons are essential to regime survival, and that's what this is all about for them. So they will be listening to the president's words. Words do matter, but they're also watching the actions of the United States, and they say with joint naval drills underway and even bigger drills set to begin in the coming days with 3 U.S. aircraft carrier strike groups, the message from the United States is very clear, and they're ready to send a clear message of their own. Chris, Allison.
Oh, my goodness, Will, the stakes just couldn't be higher. Thank you very much for reporting for us from Pyongyang. Let's discuss with CNN political analyst David Gregory and CNN political director David Chalian. David Chalian, I'll start with you. I'm tired of David Gregory. So why do you think that President Trump has toned down the rhetoric while he's in South Korea? What is that about? Who's told him to do that?
Well, we know that there have been voices in his ear for the last several months in Rex Tillerson, in Secretary Mattis, who have been trying to keep this on course. I think the president is understanding that he's playing different notes here, right? There was the saber rattling phase. And by the way, that could come back tomorrow in a tweet. Let's not assume that we now all of a sudden have a completely new, he can decide in a moment that he wants to go back to that. But during that time of the hot rhetoric, there were people around him in the closest circle who were still trying to keep this from escalating to a point of no return. And so now that he's in the region, he's trying to play a different note in this process, and that's one that sounds a little more conciliatory.
There's also a ramp-up process to what the United States has done to prepare for war, frankly. You think about what the South Koreans have done. They've been on a more diplomatic track. Japan talking about changing its constitution, buying more American military hardware. It does set up a potential, at least, to find an off-ramp for both sides, to say, let's back down on both sides, and for the North to feel like they've extracted something. If what's happening is an actual negotiation, perhaps for a freeze of where we are to prevent future tests. But I think, as David says, everything is happening right now. There are real negotiations, there's, pretty hot rhetoric on all sides, and there's a lot of anxiety among people in that region. That's who's listening to the president in the course of this trip right now. So I think he's staying extremely scripted, which is unusual, but he's doing that in the course of this trip so far.
And they have been touting that they've been pleased with some signals from China stepping up, and they feel that pressure campaign on China seems to be working a bit to their benefit, too.
So it sounds like, David Gregory, you need to have a couple of pieces of pressure on Congress as the president is giving this big speech. The attention's on him, and rightly so, but look at these contingent issues. If you're trying to get North Korea to the table, if that is the new direction, as the president seems to be indicating, of course, subject to David Chalian saying he could change at any time, well, that takes you back to the Iran deal and Congress dealing with the certification right now, because it's going to be hard to get the North to the table to do a deal if they see that the past deal with Iran winds up being meaningless. And all this military ramping up brings us back to the issue of the authorization of use of military force. Congress said they were going to do it. Mattis came in and briefed them. Since then, nothing. How important are those contingent issues?
Well, they're very important in terms of how a potential, if it's a preventive strike, would be argued, and whether Congress will assert a role to play, as some are trying to do with legislation, to say nothing can come without the acquiescence of Congress. But I don't think the administration wants to raise the flag of all the dangers of a potential military strike. I think what they want to do is try to buy themselves some room with the North to actually negotiate. And you mentioned Iran. What I think is interesting is whether this administration, like previous administrations, will simply try to buy more time to forestall a certain outcome. And in this case, stop the North from continuing to develop what they've got. And they want to stop them from testing. That's what's so provocative. And just like with Iran, trying to buy time to see if circumstances change, that may ultimately be what the administration is trying to do here.
At least they are reports of real wartime preparations by North Korea. They come from the NK News. That's a respected Seoul-based website about North Korea. Our contact there calls the exercises unusual and notable, mostly occurring on the east coast of the country. They haven't been seen for a long time. Our contact goes on to say that they could be in a response to threats by the U.S. of tactical strikes against North Korea. What is important, Sandra, is that these drills, one of the locations, a place where North Korea has been launching missiles from. This as the state news agency of the regime, Kim Jong-un, promising today more satellite launches in its so-called space program. We were in North Korea for one of these rocket launches. This space program, widely seen as just a cover for the banned missile testing. Sandra.
And what else has Secretary Mattis said over the weekend?
Yeah, he wrapped up a trip to Asia in South Korea with his counterpart in Seoul, saying, and I quote, "There is outlaw behavior being conducted by North Korea. It is illegal and unnecessary. Their missile nuclear programs, that is." Also saying the U.S. would defeat any attack. The chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Dunford, he was also in Hawaii with his regional colleagues, echoing the theme. This as, finally, a nuclear weapon-capable B-2 stealth bomber made its rounds around the Pacific, various regions, according to the military this weekend, to keep its air crews and aircraft at a high state of readiness and proficiency. Perhaps also, Sandra, to send yet one more message to the North, this in advance of this major trip by President Trump to the Asia region, starting at the end of the week. Back to Greg.
Not allow North Korea to threaten all that we have built. And we built it very much together, and we're very, very proud of it also together. But all that we've built in the decades since our soldiers sacrificed side by side in the struggle for freedom, our alliance is more important than ever to peace and security on the Korean Peninsula and across the Indo-Pacific region. That is why Vice President Pence, Secretary of State Tillerson, who's with us today, and Secretary of Defense Mattis, who was here just a short time ago, have all traveled to Seoul in the first year of my administration. It was very important to me that they did. North Korea's sixth test of a nuclear device and its missile launches are a threat not only to the people of South Korea, but to the people all across our globe. We will together confront North Korea's actions and prevent the North Korean dictator from threatening millions of innocent lives. He is indeed threatening millions and millions of lives so needlessly. North Korea is a worldwide threat that requires worldwide action. We call on every responsible nation, including China and Russia, to demand that the North Korean regime end its nuclear weapons and its missile programs and live in peace. As the South Korean people know so well, it's time to act with urgency and with great determination. All nations must implement UN Security Council regulations and cease trade and business entirely with North Korea. It is unacceptable that nations would help to arm and finance this increasingly dangerous regime. As we work together to resolve this problem using all available tools short of military action, the United States stands prepared to defend itself and its allies using the full range of our unmatched military capabilities if need be.
Top story this morning, though. U.S. President Donald Trump has stated that the era of strategic patience with North Korea is no more. But with Trump set to arrive in South Korea in a couple of hours from now, Pyongyang is stressing that the regime's stance on its nuclear issue remains unchanged. Kim Hyo-sun starts us off.
Wrapping up his stay in Tokyo, President Trump declared that the era of strategic patience with North Korea is over. Speaking after his summit with Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe on Monday, Trump reiterated that Pyongyang's nuclear and missile development remains a grave threat to the entire world.
The regime continued development of its unlawful weapons programs, including its illegal nuclear tests and outrageous launches of ballistic missiles directly over Japanese territory, are a threat to the civilized world and international peace and stability. We will not stand for that. The era of strategic patience is over.
And as President Trump continues his five-nation Asian tour, North Korea state media is stressing that its stance remains unchanged. The Nodong Shinmun has published a commentary explaining that Washington should not expect any changes from the regime. Pyongyang's official Korean Central News Agency also released a commentary last weekend, highlighting that the U.S. should not even dream about sitting down for denuclearization talks. Such a strong media response can be interpreted as the regime's intent to reiterate its stance on its nuclear issue as President Trump arrives in South Korea, where the main focus will be North Korea.
Ago during negotiations over North Korea's nuclear program. We know how that turned out. They now have a bigger nuclear arsenal than they ever have and are perfecting their missile capabilities. And North Korean officials reiterated to me just within the last couple of hours that they will, in their words, round off their nuclear program, which means more nuclear tests and more missile launches. But the big question, when? Will they do it to coincide with President Trump's visit here in the region? And of course, the unknown, how will the president on the final steps, they say, for their nuclear program. And even though President Trump did say that diplomacy is on the table and the North Koreans haven't ruled out talks either, the U.S. wants denuclearization. They're going to be listening very closely, Chris. And we know that the Trump administration has been hinting for several days now that they could be making an announcement about whether to put North Korea back on the list of state sponsors of terrorism, a list that they were taken off almost 10 years ago. And the administration respond to that. Of course, it depends on what kind of test. North Korea has threatened everything from an above-ground nuclear test to launching missiles in the direction of the U.S. territory of Guam. Both of those have not happened yet, but the North Koreans are certainly doubling down.